Okay, I think the only one we're missing that was expected is Valerie. Carrie can't make it because she's in Paris, and then Deb Brown, of course, can't be here. Um, did anybody else want to take minutes? Or Julie said she's willing to do it if nobody else would, but I didn't know if anybody else was interested in taking minutes.
I'm going to pass. I'm a little too stressed this week. I've got a board meeting tonight and a board meeting tomorrow and all kinds of other stuff going on. And
Julie will take minutes for us. All right. So I'll call us to order. And first thing I have to do is approve the minutes from the September meeting. I know Deb sent them out. Did everybody get a chance to look at them and read them and stuff? Were there any corrections or suggestions for changes at all? Nothing? Okay. Then I would welcome a motion to approve the September minutes as presented.
We'll accept the minutes from the September meeting.
Okay. And a second?
I'll second.
Mark Takazawa will second it. All in favor of approving the minutes from the September meeting, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Let's go right into Debbie's treasurer's report.
Okay, let's see. Let me get share my screen here. Can you hear me okay? Is my volume up?
Yes.
1 second. My volume's over the share button. Move. I can't get to the share. Okay, had to wait for the volume to go away, then I could do share. I'd wait for the volume. Okay. Okay, we'll start with the balances here. Those were presented by email to the board. We're doing fine here. On point checking and savings and our Raymond James investments. It's been a good run for investments. So you'll see on the other sheet when I pull that up that investments are doing well. It doesn't always mean that they will, but right now they have been doing well. Let's see. I don't think we presented to the whole board. I'm sorry, I don't remember. Did I email the whole board saying that the IRS had forgiven our?
No.
Oh,
No, I think
okay.
you sent it to me. Yeah.
I sent it to maybe the finance committee. I apologize. So I apologize. So the IRS has forgiven our fees and our penalties. So we are completely in the clear and they've accepted all of our past returns. So everything is good with that. Everyone who pitched in on that and did a great job. That was I had just gotten my new job and I was up to my eyeballs in work. So thank you all for that. And the IRS just pushed it through. That was great. And let's see, I'm going to switch to we're going to have a budget discussion later.
I just have to ask a quick question, Debbie,
Sure.
about the investments. I know you went to the credit union and talked about moving the savings to investments. And I know we kind of had some email back and forth with that. What's the status of that?
Still the same. I'm sorry, as that email, I haven't gotten back to the bank. I think the emails had said that we wanted to, so On Point has a nonprofit rate. I think that's what we had said that we might want to do, but I do have to review what we've said in the email with the finance committee, and then we can do that option. But no, I haven't gotten that done yet.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so then let's look at, and we're going to have the budget discussion a little later, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to go over some of the race numbers here. Can everyone see that? Race numbers. Let me move this.
Yep.
So Deb Brown let me know that I had miscategorized a couple of things. I confused income for Hag Lake and Hag Mud. So we got that all straightened out. So it doesn't change our overall numbers. It just changes the actual profit numbers for the Hag Mud and the Hag Road numbers for now. So you can see those. And I was trying to decide why that happened. And because we have 3 different sources for income, where our income comes from. Run sign up, Run sign up 2, which that's what I'm confused about, and ultra sign up. So Run sign up has all of our races in there, but there's one stray race that I can't find in run sign up, but we just get money for it. So I think that must be the Hag Lake run. It's not connected to all of our other races in run sign up. So that's why I was confusing it with ultra sign up, which was because it's such a different source, but still it says run sign up. Or anyway, I think we've got it all straightened out here. So, but if you're a race director, or if you want to look at the race director, or if you want to look at the race numbers and you feel yours aren't correct, please let me know. I'm happy to get those all fixed up for you. And I think race directors have submitted their budgets, so we'll go over some of the budget numbers later. Of course, we don't have all the numbers for Best M Run, and Autumn Leaves and Turkey Trot haven't quite happened yet, so those will still be forthcoming. I wanted to show you the numbers over here. We're still in the black, except for our, we have magnet calendars here, but that also is kind of 2 years worth. But we also, so that, we knew we would be over on that. Everything else seems to be okay here. The medals, we did have those medals that we know we've talked about in past meetings. Other than that, it looks like we're pretty much on target. We only have a couple months left of the year for our budget, so seems to be okay. Anybody have any questions on this?
No, looks good.
Okay, so then I'll hold it here and then we can just do the budget discussion later. Is that
Okay.
everybody okay with that?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and start. I had the discussion topic. There were in no particular order, but we'll just go ahead and go. There's the annual award recipients, and we need to finalize them by the next meeting because we need to then order everything in order to have them in time for the January awards banquet. And this is assuming, and I should ask this before we do anything else, skipped the December meeting. So we pretty much got everything done October, November, and then we canceled the December meeting. What do you all feel about doing that again this year? Yes, please.
December does get busy.
Yeah. Any other opinions about that? I don't see any answers at all. All right, so let's.
So
Okay.
let's skip it.
All
I
right.
would say, do I have,
I'm not sure I'm not sure what the question is.
The question is, are you okay with skipping the December meeting if we get all of our business done at the November meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, we will plan on doing that. So Julie and I have been working on the awards. There's a very time-consuming process for finding they're technically the easy ones to figure out. It's the female runner of the year, male runner, female masters, non-binary, walkers, all that. And it's a point system. So we just go through all the results and Julie creates a spreadsheet and puts little boxes, X's and the things, and then adds them all up to see who got the most points. And so we're working on that. We do have some suggestions for some of the awards. Looking at the past history, we didn't want to repeat people who've gotten it before. So like for the Al Nakata Award, that generally goes to an older member who's been participating in our events. And there were two gentlemen, David Schmidlin and Charles Elder. David Schmidlin is 80 years old. He's been a member since 2015, and he's done 4 events this year.
We should say member since 2015, but that's because that's when Run Sign Up went in.
He may have
been
been a member prior to that,
Prior,
but
we
we don't
don't
have
know.
any data prior to Run Signups. And Charles Elder has also been a member in Run Signup since 2016. He's 74. He's also done 4 events. And I don't know either of these people personally. Is anybody familiar with those 2 names? Okay.
I might be familiar with Charles Elder. I'm not sure of his last name, but I think that might be him. I guess I could look up the race results from the race that took place on Saturday. He was running. I think I know who it is, and I think he volunteered last year for the Turkey Trot parking lot assistant.
Okay.
Um,
I think you're thinking of Charles Brasher.
Oh, Charles Brasher, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Charles
Okay.
Brasher, yeah.
okay, that corrects me. Then forget it. I don't know him.
The two guys with their membership and the number of events and everything being equal, we thought we'd do the Al Nakata Award to David Schmidlin because he's 80, so give it to the older one. I should specify for all of these awards, we don't have to give all of the awards every year. So if we can't,
Right,
if
right.
we don't think there's somebody who's worthy of it.
Uh-huh.
So, but somebody who's done 4 events, that means he's, pretty committed to ORRC events. There's also the Helen Lockman Award, and there was really only one person. She's only done 2 events, and that's Patrice DeGraff. She is 72. We were looking through the Jeff Huber's participant challenge results, and they list everybody's names and their ages and how many events they did. So that kind of made it easy to go through and find the older participants and how many events they've done. Patrice is also in the 1200 Club. We know that. So, so that's.
I had another thought, and it could be someone that we think about again next year or down the line. Are you familiar with Nancy Fisher?
Yes. She's not
necessarily old enough.
She's not necessarily, I would say.
Not very old.
Yeah. She's in
Probably
the
old.
Masters
only
Runner of the
50.
Year award and the Runner of the Year. Yeah, she's in the running for the Runner of the Year or the Masters Runner of the Year.
Yeah.
But she's only, she's not that old.
55.
Yeah. So, but she's definitely, she's going to be one that we can give it to later if she's.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to make sure she was somewhere on the radar.
Yes, for sure. The other one that we had was the Kathy Weidkamp Award, which typically goes to a family member and everything. And we thought we could give that to Tom Kelleher. He is Kim Kovacs's husband. So he kind of by default helps out with the Thursday night training group. And he did a whole lot of work with Dual. So we thought he would be a good one to give for that one. And then let's see,
Well, she's here.
yeah. Well, we actually thought about Debbie Hall for the Volunteer of the Year Award, mainly because of all the IRS stuff that you were dealing with and faxing the 30 pages to the IRS. And I know a lot of people helped with that, but you were the kind of the main contact person and following up with
One of
that.
those thankless
One of
jobs.
those thankless jobs that's behind the scenes that nobody really cares about.
Well, and it had such a huge impact on the
Yeah.
club.
It's a lot of
Right.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree with that nomination.
Sure, there are many more people who volunteer more than me.
No, this
Sorry,
is not the number. This is not the volunteer. This is
Yeah.
the Dick and Diane Bemrose is the people who volunteer most. And honestly, we're gonna get that one.
Yeah.
That one. Just looking at the number of times that's just counting times, and so that's
No, the
the
volunteer.
the volunteer of the year is given to somebody who does something special for the club that year, and I think this was really important for us to do. I'm trying to think of, she's not here, so we can talk about it. The Lifetime Membership Award, we don't give out every year, and we've given it out to some people, but we were going through the history of ORRC volunteers, the history of board directors, history of race directors, and all of that. And there are actually 4 people who haven't been recognized with an award on almost any kind. And I just thought they've done so much for the club that we really should do them. So we don't have to do all 4 of them, but I thought they would all be really good ones. And there has been years when we've given no lifetime membership, and there's been years when we've given 5 or 6 or 1 or 2. So the number doesn't really, we're not held to any one number. But the 4 people, one was Alan Caballi, because he's, back in the day, he was on the board for like 6 or 7 years. He was race director for multiple events. He's still volunteering. He did our communications workshop, and he's kind of the voice of some of our events where he agrees to be the announcer at some of our events and stuff. So he's still very involved. He was the race director for Blue Lake Relay from 93 to 99. He also did the Turkey Trot from 2001 to 2003. Of course, Pumpkin Ridge and Autumn. He was Autumn Leaves from 2003. He was on the board from 94 to 2004, and then of course helped us in the transition. And he's also volunteered at multiple expos and events and all that stuff. So he was one that I thought it was time for him to be recognized for all of his work, because I didn't see him being given anything else in the past as an award.
Yeah, and most important, he had to put up with me at the expo. So
So that was one. The other one is Margie Palmrose, and several of you worked with Margie when she was on the board last year. She was ORRC's first female president back in 2002 and 2003. She was on the board from 2001 to 2011, so 10 years, and then she came back to the board. She was the treasurer from 2007 to 2011, and she was the RRCA state rep 2005 to 2007. And she's still volunteering. She was volunteering at Turkey Trot the last 2 years. She's been, she's just doing lots of different things. She's not going to be at Turkey Trot this year because she has some family issues going on, but she's never been given an award by ORRC. And I just thought, again, this is somebody who's done a whole lot and should be recognized for that. So, and then two more. One was Jeff Weirman. Many of you know him. He was the organizer of the Tuesday night workout group from 2003 to 2014. He was on the board from 2003 to 2014, including secretary and VP of races. He was the Blue Lake race director from 2008 to 2014. He was on Turkey Trot from 2010 to 2014, and he's currently our equipment manager. I mean, he just has done so much for so long, and I know he's taken a step back more recently, but he's still helping us out with equipment and everything. And again, I thought it would be good if we recognized his past work with the club, since he's still doing stuff. So that was the third one. And then the last one is Valerie Pratt, because she's also been on the board for years. She's been treasurer multiple times. She ran the Kids Passport program for a couple of years. She ran the 10K series 1 year. She was basically Best Damn Run race director and Shampooey race director. She's been volunteering since 2009 in multiple roles, and she's never been recognized with an award by ORRC of any kind. And again, I thought we need to honor those people who they're behind the scenes roles or they're in the face roles or everything. They just need to be recognized for all of their work. So those were the four people, and I know that's a lot.
To do all this year.
But they just all seem to be very deserving of everything they've done for decades.
All four of those people are more than worthy of such an award, and I'm surprised they haven't been recognized before. So, if we of course there are no limits, but if we are giving fewer of the other awards, to give more of this particular award is appropriate. And like I said, those four people, are more than deserving.
yeah, I agree. All four had to put up with me. So yeah, especially Valerie. So, I agree.
Okay. Right. Well, what I would do then, I think is everybody in agreement for the other awards? Do we want to not give any of these things out? We don't have a nomination for the Club Appreciation Award, which is for an outside organization. We haven't given that out every year, and I honestly couldn't think of anybody that kind of did something special for the club this year that we needed to recognize. Anybody else have any other ideas for awards?
I like all the suggestions. Once again, I'm going to throw a name out for consideration in the future.
Sure.
Dave Barnes, maybe somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
He's been very active with race support for a long time, and now he's doing behind the scenes.
Doing good content. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, maybe someday down the road.
Yeah. He has received the Al Nakata Award. So he has been recognized in some way, but I can definitely see him getting something. So, okay.
And another one, maybe in the future, and I know you paid for it, but what about Jeff Huber timing?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, he has received the Club Appreciation Award before.
Okay.
but we could give it to him again because I don't know how long it's been since he's actually received that, but we could definitely consider him for that.
And I don't know if I don't know all the awards that might be available, but I was thinking about Jeff Huber in terms of maybe there's an award for a ORRC partnership, best, not best, but some sort of vendor partnership that really has done a lot for us. And that could be, boy, his name slips out of my head, the photographer.
Lester. Yeah, Lester.
Yeah, something like that. And, some vendors who really have really helped us or stuck with us over the years. That might be something to look at.
Good. It's a good idea. Okay. Okay. Well, do we want to go ahead? Well, I'm trying to think of what the process would be for this. I don't think we need board approval, like a specific motion to approve these. I think as long as we've discussed them and stuff. And Julie, we have to wait for autumn leaves to finalize the point award winners to make sure we've got all of them done. But what I'll do then is just send everybody, once we have all of that at the end of this month, then I'll send out a list of everybody and everybody can give their final comments on it.
Yeah, I had a question on the participants and the ones that finished. What if they started that race but DNF'd? How do you want to count those?
Oh, if they started and didn't finish.
Yeah.
Have we had that happen?
I don't know about this year, but I know last year we had a couple at Shampooey.
Okay.
I think we had a couple at Dejon last year too, but I don't know about this year.
Okay.
Probably some like at a hag or something.
Yeah, I would say if they showed up and started, I would still give them participation.
Participate. Okay.
Because they went out there and started it. I mean, if they had a bad day, that would suck.
Yeah.
I would still want to give them credit for it.
Okay.
Okay. That's the awards. RRCA convention. This is happening the same time as Vernonia. Anybody, I know Carrie has specifically mentioned that she would like to go again. She went last year for the first time. So is there anybody else who would be interested in going? We sent a large group last year.
It's in Arlington.
It's in Arlington, Virginia.
Well, obviously I can't go because of Vernonia.
Right.
I think it's good to have a good that Carrie goes. I think it's always good to have at least one person who's been to a convention before to help guide any newbies. So I would definitely endorse Carrie going again to be that person. Do you anticipate any new board members? I mean, that's one thing you've done historically is send them. Do you anticipate anybody new to the board coming up?
Joe Casanova is going to be running to join the board.
Okay.
Also, I would say Adnan and Mark Takazawa and Joel have not gone, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and all three of you have agreed to run for re-election. Thank you. Would any of you be interested in going, or?
I don't think I'd be able to.
Okay.
No, look.
I mean, I'd like to help with Vernonia, so
Okay.
or either help with Vernonia or run Vernonia. So I'd love to go at some point.
Just not this year. Not good timing. Mark?
Yeah.
I would like to, but I don't want to take anybody's spot.
Oh,
So.
I think Mark should go. I was thinking that. I do. I think he would have a good time there and I mean, get valuable knowledge and things to bring back.
Okay. So we could send Carrie and Mark Takazawa.
And possibly Joe.
And possibly Joe.
Did Joel?
Joel said no. Okay. Well, I'll confirm with everybody. I assumed in the budget discussion that's coming up that we weren't going to be sending as many people. And so that would be fine if we only sent 3 people. That'd be great. Okay. Okay, let's go into budget. And do you want to share that screen again, Debbie? Or
yes.
Mine too, that either.
I can. Let me just get it
here. Did everybody have a chance to review the draft budget?
Yep.
All right, can we see it? Okay, here's 2026 draft. Is this the one you're thinking, or did I go with? Yeah, that's it.
I think that's what I see.
Yes.
Yeah, because I updated the shampooing numbers. Yeah.
Is it the right ones? Okay.
Yeah, that's the right one.
Okay. Do
Um,
you want, go ahead.
So I just wanted to specify or explain a couple of things based on the notes at the bottom that you've seen. The donations line item, we're not really going to see income from that when Debbie does her reports because that shows up in additional race revenue. Run sign up doesn't break it out. They just send an amount for an event. And so, for example, like 1200 Club, well, 1200 Club is a little bit different because they don't have any income other than donations. But if Run Sign Up is sending registration income and people also make donations, they're just going to send a whole amount.
Right.
Yeah.
I
So
forgot to look for that. I can try. Yeah, I'd have to really look.
unless you go into Run Sign Up specifically and run a specific financial report for it, it's hard to break it out. But as long as we know that the race income probably will be higher than what the race directors are expecting, then we can, and I was pretty conservative with the donations, but I mean, we have well over 1,000 already this year in donations. So it's not like we're expecting huge amounts. So I wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you.
Let's see, what else is there? All the race directors got back to me, and so these are the numbers that they're giving me based on their estimated participants and their estimated expenses. I have calculated based on another discussion we're going to have what the race directors said they were going to spend on volunteer dollars, and figured out the difference if we approve the increase in what we give to volunteers. That's what the overage is right now at the bottom of this budget. So what we would do is I can go in and update the numbers for expenses for each event that has said they're going to pay volunteers to reflect a doubling of what they budgeted, and that would then balance us. So two things. I know that Hag Mud is going to be in the hole by a large amount. And that's because there were so many people who deferred from last year because of the snow delay. And so they're going to be running it, but we're not going to get any income because we got the income last year. So unless we increase participation, they're going to have a pretty big loss this year. Also, Deb said that Mark Freese is stepping back. I've actually reached out to a couple of the former Hag Mud race directors and asked them, said, I'm not asking you to be co-RD with Deb, but do you know of anybody in the trail running community that would be willing to be a co-RD with Deb, so that she's not kind of doing it by herself. So if you have any ideas for a co-race director for Hag Mud for Deb, that would be really great.
I will check my contacts
Okay.
on that.
So I know that Dave Solstice, Randy is going to have some, one of the suggestions he had was charging less, but not including parking in your registration fee. Because that way he doesn't have to pay for so many permits and then not use them or have extra, it's a pretty large expense. And he is also going to try to do something much less expensive for the giveaway. Just for, oh, Joel. Okay. Joel just texted me. I'm likely to be co-RD for Hag. Oh, that would be so awesome. Thank you, Joel. So yeah, he's hoping to, because he lost a lot of money last year, and so he's hoping to at least break even this year for that. I think that's it for the races. If you want to scroll down, Debbie, for the other expenses.
Can I just say, I'm going to say something real fast here, just to it's an ongoing process to delineate more and more on how our our plain expenses are categorized. So I've put it into community and events expenses And down, I'll go back up. Down here are just our regular operating expenses. So this would be more outreach and advertising, marketing, something to get our club known or to help our members have more recognition amongst themselves or appreciate our members and other people. And the other is just more straight operating expenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of these, I just used the previous year's numbers, thinking they were going to stay close to the same. The social runs, it was interesting, the Monday night group versus the Thursday night group. And I think part of it is a basis of the size of their groups. Joe and Fabiola Lopez organized the Monday night workouts the first Monday, and their budget is very small. It's only like $1,000. They're spending like $80 a month on their pizza. For the Thursday night group, they have a larger group, and I think they have more issues with where they can get the food and what restaurant they're using. And so her budget was closer to like $3,500. So that's where the numbers are for those two. And I know in the winter she was doing like 200 a month, but in the summers their numbers went up to like 350 and 400. So they're spending a lot on food in the summer months. I don't know if that's going to stay high or not, and she wasn't sure. So we just kind of guesstimated high for that. Was there any other questions about the budget or what we base things on?
I have a curiosity question.
Sure.
Out of those Monday and Thursday night workout training groups that are definitely, I feel really good about doing that and outreach in the community and stuff. Do very many of those people that do the workouts, are they people that come to our races?
I don't know. I do know that Joe and Fabiola last month had a volunteer sign up, and they had 3 people from the group list their names and emails as possible future volunteers for the club.
Oh.
So I don't know if Kim is doing that. I know they definitely advertise our races at the stores, so people are given information about it. I know they mentioned that.
Yep.
I don't know how many. I don't even know how many, honestly, are actually ORRC members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I got a curiosity question on that Thursday. You said to
Mhm.
go higher up in the summer for that. Are they paying for beer and alcohol, or is it just food?
No, it's just food. We
Okay.
were paying when we initially were starting it. They were paying for food and alcohol, and we said, no, we're not paying for drinks. So
Yeah.
we stopped that because it was getting prohibitively expensive, even for a small group.
Okay.
Joel? Joel, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry. And this is, I just wanted to, this is the run that we sponsor at Foot Traffic, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And I just wanted to say that also, don't they provide like a good amount of gift cards for like our after race raffles? I think that's a pretty good deal too.
They did. They provided, oh gosh, how many raffles? No, it was more than that. It was like $25 gift cards for different race directors to hand out at our events this year. So they gave out, it's a really good partnership for the two of us.
I agree.
Okay. What other stuff do we have down there, Debbie?
More, I'll move down. Okay.
Yeah.
So our general operating expenses here.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't see
Yeah.
anything that's huge, big increase from last year.
Yeah, they're pretty similar. And some of the items like taxes, we don't pay taxes, but I didn't know if we were going to be paying an accountant to help us with our taxes. So I kept that expense in there, not knowing if we were going to have that.
Oh, I guess we should put, so yes, either that or professional fees. We
Yeah.
can put it under taxes. When she helped us last year, it was under professional fees.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I think we should increase either taxes or professional fees, one or the other if we can, but you know, I think that's enough. probably.
To budget something in case something comes up, kind of like this year, we're going to be paying Carissa $1,500 to do the logo, to finish up the logo work. We don't know what we're going to have next year, if there's something that we may need done or something. So it's good to just have a placeholder in case we need it.
Are we, with that we're paying her with, is that in IT services? Where are we putting that?
I would put it under professional services as a graphic designer,
Then, we should,
but that's
That
from this year's budget. That's going to be for this year, that we're going to pay her before the end of.
oh, this year. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Okay. So yeah, as I said, there's going to be a deficit. We're going to have an overage of a certain amount, but if we approve the volunteer, then that would balance out the budget. The way I balanced the budget was our interest dividend income at the top. I just had, I included enough income to balance it. We're probably going to get a heck of a lot more than that because it's a pretty low amount. But if you want to scroll up, Debbie, on that.
So right
I don't-
now you're budgeting at that 2708, right?
And that's just to balance the budget because we don't want to have a difference in the income versus expenses. But in all likelihood, I mean, this year we have already $11,000, I think. So,
12, right there, 12.2.
yeah. So we know we're going to have more income for that. We just don't know how much.
I think that's smart.
Yeah. And that way, if a race does have a bigger loss than they think, or something happens, we have an expense, then we have extra money to cover it. So that's kind of what we came up with. Is everybody comfortable with this?
We're balanced down here almost.
Do you need a motion?
We could make a motion. Yep.
I move that we accept the proposed, the 2026 budget as proposed.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Joel seconded that. Everybody or any further discussion? Okay, everybody in favor of approving the 2026 draft budget, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
any opposed? All right, motion passes. The budget is approved. Great. Then we'll make an adjustment once we have our next discussion.
I'm gonna stop the sharing.
You can stop sharing. Yep. Okay. The election is coming up, and I want to really, really thank everybody who has agreed to run for re-election. We can't do this without you guys, and it's just, you guys do a remarkable job. I think you all saw my email about who was going to be. It's going to be a large ballot again, because most of us are up for re-election. So it would be, Joel, Debbie, Mark Barrett, Adnan, Deb Brown, Susan Cooper, Joe Casanova is going to be new on the board, and then Julia and myself. So those are going to be the people who are on the board. I was just going to use your previous board pictures and statements for the election from the last time. So if you want something new, get that to me before, what did I say, the end of November? No, end of this month, so that I can get it, because we're going to do a newsletter that kind of talks about the election to the members and stuff. And I'll make sure Joe gets us something for that. The other thing that we just need to be thinking about is that Deb does not want to be secretary anymore after this year because she wants to focus on the races that she's co-directing. So we need to have somebody else step up to be secretary. So nobody got back to me saying they'd be willing to step in, but we'd be thinking about that, because when we do the election in December and notify everybody who's going to be on the board, at the January meeting, we're going to be electing officers because all of the terms are expiring. Debbie has said she will continue to be treasurer. Mark has said he's going to be VP for one more year, and then Carrie will possibly take over after that, at that point. And then
My understanding that in terms of the election, of the way the ballots go, is that named positions that are specifically named in our bylaws, you have to run for that specific position, but all other positions are essentially open. And then we can decide after the election. That's my understanding.
actually, Yeah, we changed the bylaws so that no officer positions you weren't running for a specific position. What happened was
Okay.
the members vote for the board of directors members, and then the board of
Okay.
directors members elect the officers. So at the member meeting in January, we would all approve a new slate of candidates for the officer positions.
Okay. I
that-
did not I did not realize that change had been made, but
Yeah, that was the bylaws changed last 2 years.
it's all up for grabs. Whee!
So anyway, please be thinking about if you can do the secretary position. All you nearly need to do is make sure the agenda gets out to everybody. You work with the president to make sure what's on the agenda. You take minutes at the meeting and then send the minutes out to everybody to review. That's basically it. So if you can do it, that would be great.
Carrie's going to run the election.
Carrie's going to run the election because since we're on the ballot, we can't run it for us. And it basically is just, we're going to create the ballot. She'll turn it on and off and then certify the results. Pretty simple. Okay. So that's election. Volunteer group payment amount. Mark wanted this to be on the agenda and I got information from Carrie, even though she's in Paris. She says she wholeheartedly supports it. So I'm going to take it away, Mark, and discuss.
Yeah, just that I'm in process of, just getting volunteer groups for turkey trot as I've done in the past. And it just got me thinking about, well, how much we donate to groups, understanding, of course, that we don't pay volunteers, but a nonprofit group like a team or a group where we donate a certain amount of money per volunteer for their group, for the volunteers they provide. And currently it is $25 for a 4-hour volunteer assignment, and recognizing that it's been a few years since we raised it, recognizing that things cost a lot more, recognizing that to as an incentive to get groups to do it, make it worthwhile. You figure, okay, you got their time, but also, gas money and all this kind of different considerations. So I can definitely see the need to increase that amount. How much is, if you follow the emails, some of the discussions are already started. I guess the upper limit would be $50 because that's what somebody just, general volunteer, they get $50 credit, for future events. So that's kind of the upper limit. But then also, if you've read kind of the email, we've already talked about some of the key issues here, which is not all volunteer assignments are the same. Some are just 2 hours, some are 4 hours, and if we were to do like a flat rate or maybe an hourly rate or some kind of a hybrid thing, it would require more tracking by the race directors. Because right now I just say, I need 20 volunteers, give me 20 people, and they show up, and that group of 20 people, some might work 2 hours, some 3, some 4, and they all get the same amount of money. And if we were to incorporate some kind of a sliding scale, that would be a little bit more tracking on my end as an RD and other RDs to say, okay, to do that. But that would be, if we were to, specify, an hourly amount, like $10 an hour or something like that, or whatever it might be, it gets more complicated, but it might also be more fair, acknowledging that, not all volunteer assignments are the same. But I think definitely there is a need to increase the amount. I mean, for what it's worth, I've been donating $30 all of this year anyway. I'm for my races, I would just kick it up a couple of bucks anyway, because that just seemed the right thing to do. But I think we need to have the other thing to mention is that whatever policy we have needs to be consistent across all of our events. That way, groups, if they volunteer for something in January and they sign up for November, they know they're going to get a certain amount. We're not going to change it on them or something like that. So there should be a consistent policy and practice within our events. So that's kind of the broad thing. I don't know, throw it out there for comments, suggestions, whatever else.
I know Carrie, I asked Carrie what she thought as the volunteer coordinator, and she thought it would be really good. She's totally in support of doubling it to 50. She thought it would be easier to recruit volunteers, especially groups in high schools and stuff like that who are trying to raise some funding. And so I also think with, like what you said, it needs to be consistent across all races. So there's not, our race directors outbidding each other to try to get groups of volunteers and stuff and being consistent. We can afford it. We're not over budget. It's not going to break the bank if we change it from 25 to 50, looking at it's only $6,900 more in the year, and we can cover that. Joel?
So I guess my question, this is just more of a like process question. So when we pay groups when we pay groups to volunteer, we're basically saying like when we put out like our usual emails to like recruit, we know like we need X amount of volunteers for the race.
Mhm. Yes.
When we send it out to different volunteer groups, we're saying, hey, we need 10 volunteers. I mean, it's the same amount, correct? Like we're not saying, oh, we want like 10 group volunteers and then like 10 individuals. Like it counts into that same that total volunteers we need for the race. Is that right?
Yeah, basically when we approach groups to ask if they would want to volunteer for our event and that we're going to pay them, we just say we need volunteers for this area, and this area. How many can you send us? So
Okay.
yeah, we're not specifying we need this many individuals or this many groups. We're just taking whoever wants to come in, and we'll pay the group differently. They don't get the volunteer credit that we send out to everybody else.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Okay. So like, I mean, this is just so I can understand it. So like, let's say for autumn leaves, like we need, 20 total volunteers.
Mhm.
We would send out an email saying, hey, we would like 10 people or X amount of people. And then they would agree to fill those spots. And then we would go ahead from there and, fill the spots we haven't filled with the groups with individuals.
Yeah, basically what I would suggest if you're doing that is you have your volunteers sign up in Ultra Sign Up where people can volunteer for specific areas.
Yeah.
A lot of times what Carrie will do for events right prior to the events is she'll reach out to the race director and say, what areas specifically are you missing people in?
Okay.
She can include that in her email to groups saying, this is what we really need. A lot of times groups are really good for being course marshals or for
Sure.
helping
Yeah.
out with food
Aid
areas or
stations.
at aid stations, things like that.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I just kind of wanted to understand like how.
If I may, like, this is, how can I say, when I set up an event, through Run Sign Up, it's the same on Ultra Sign Up where you list the volunteer positions, the where and the times and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you start getting the word out, and some of those positions are filled by people that just want to volunteer. Their wife is running it, so they're going to volunteer, kind of a thing. Also, the club has a list of past volunteers. We send out an email blast for each of our events saying, "Hey, something's coming up. Please sign up." Those people sign up as individuals, and that's usually, at least for the bigger events, is not enough. And so, what a lot of race directors like I do is we develop relationships with clubs and groups and schools and such, and so we contact like the coach or who's ever in charge of the group to bring people, and they thing is that once, if I say like, well, for example, like for Turkey Trot, Century High School last year provided 20 volunteers, and I've contacted somebody at Century High School that said we'll do 20 again this year. And so for my records, I still fill the slots on Run Sign Up. I'll go in and write
Fill the
Century
slots
High
on Run Sign Up. I'll go and write
Century High School number 2 and so on. I'm not putting in names. I'm just putting in that they're going to be filling those spots with people.
Okay.
And then it comes down to how many people actually show up. Like I have a sign-in sheet. So if only 19 show up, I pay them for 19, based on the sign-up sheet. But And like the group volunteers, typically we try to put them at the same spot. Turkey Trot's a great event because you put a whole bunch of people at the finish line. You know, they get to be with their friends, but you know, they're getting stuff done. So, you know, I think it's filling all those spots and is from a number of different sources that we do.
Okay.
And you know, in terms of budget, like I said, that when somebody signs up to volunteer, they've got three options. They can get the $50 credit, they can donate it to PIF, um, or if they're a group volunteer, then they don't get it. So, but that all of that is, I know, I'm not sure about Ultra sign up, but I know for sure that's built
I'm
into
not sure about Ultra sign up, but I know for sure that's built into
It's pretty similar.
Run sign up's got it.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So like as a race director, like let's say like we could send out an email saying, hey, we'd like to sponsor your group, and then they would tell us what they need, and then I would just delete those spots or fill those spots depending on what platform I'm using.
Fill the spots. Yeah, don't delete them.
Yeah, you can, like this, like I said, if I get, well, like right now, it's like it's for Turkey Trot, it's still a ways away. But so like what I tell them like is like back to Century High School, say how many people, just for now I just need a number. What's your best guess how many people you can provide for the Turkey Trot? And so right now when I look at my spreadsheet and I figure, okay, I'm gonna set aside 20 spots and I know those will be filled. And then like 2 weeks before I check in with the group leader and say, okay, you said 20, are we good for 20? And they'll, confirm that number as it gets closer, and then like set a sign-in sheet to know for sure how many show up. So how that works.
Cool. Thank you. That's quite helpful. I just didn't know like, how the groups kind of fit into how we recruit for volunteers at events.
And
A
then,
lot of it depends on the size, there's not a number of volunteers. Like I got two big ones. Vernonia, ideally I need 175 volunteers, and Turkey Trots is about 100 volunteers. Ideally if every spot was filled. So I do everything I can.
and then he would, or, race director would say, okay, please send a check to Century High School for $500 or whatever it is. And so
Mhm.
you don't, that would be part of the race budget, but I would send out that check to that high school.
Yes.
And for Joel Mann.
Susan.
Well, it was so long ago, I don't remember who was talking, but I think it might have been Debbie was talking about how there's not, maybe not equity across all the different volunteer positions. Some people might work longer, some people might work shorter, some people might have a harder job, some people might have a cushier job. I think that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That all comes out in the wash. You treat every volunteer position the same.
Yeah, don't make it hard on the RDs or the volunteers to track where they do.
No, you know what? Some people are just going to have cushier jobs.
No, it's still going.
That's it.
Any other comments about the proposal?
Yeah, go get this shirt, bud.
Willow, do your hair comb first.
So having no
Susan,
other discussion,
Susan, I would agree with you. It's kind of like I said, for a group, some within a group, some would work longer, lesser, and it just like, well, I had to work 5 hours. Well, I only worked 2. Well, the club got,
Yeah.
paid for 8 hours for those 2 people, so it all kind of worked out, kind of thing. So, and frankly, I mean, doubling it, I think groups that have already committed, hearing it's going to double, and just be happy with that, having more chance. And things for what's true for RDs out there. Keep in mind, like I say, they don't get the $50 credit if they're from a group, but still, if there is a volunteer, give me a pair of socks or whatever, I still do that even for the group volunteers, because if I'm a high school student and I'm here, for my school, I still walk away with a pair of socks. And if there's a raffle, they get a raffle ticket, chance to win prizes like everybody else, so, as we all know, you got to treat volunteers like rock stars, because, they make it all possible.
So I would like to make a motion to increase the volunteer group payment amount to $50 from 25.
Effective,
I would say effective January 1st, so not messing around with this year's events, just going forward to with next year.
I'm just wondering about Turkey Trot, because that's why I'm, maybe if I could, I think that will help with Turkey Trot.
Don't we always have plenty for turkey?
Oh, we
trot?
always had plenty for turkey trot.
I thought we always had.
We were
students-
turning people away for turkey
You
trot.
might just pay more anyway. Race director's discretion.
Wait a minute. Is it in your budget? Are you gonna?
That's
well,
what I was gonna say. If it's in your budget, sure.
Budgets are just recommendations.
You're more like guidelines.
I don't know. I would like to. Has a formal motion been made yet?
I just did starting in January 26th, but I mean, the reason
I want to, because I'm thinking of effective with Turkey Trot,
well,
because
if
I
it's
think that would
effective,
set
I
the
would
tone.
say make it effective for autumn leaves. If we're gonna do it, make it effective for both. Those are the two races that are left.
effective immediately
I
instead
guess
of
how
waiting to get
I guess
research.
how much can it really cost us? I mean,
Well,
$500.
for autumn leaves, I don't think we're actually looking
For autumn leaves, I don't think we're actually looking for.
Why don't we go, I'll make a motion to increase to 50, effective immediately. If you want to do it, great.
I'll second that. Can I second that?
Debbie seconded it. Any more discussion?
So effective now, or
Yes,
Effective
because
now.
if it passes tonight,
yes,
Right.
it goes on the minutes, do we have to approve the minutes before it's actually official?
Oh, no.
Immediately.
No, the
No.
minutes are just a
Okay.
record of the meeting. The motion actually takes effect. Joel?
financially, I mean, 50, we're cool with, we can afford that going forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. if you
Yeah.
can afford
I
it,
mean,
you might-
I think it's a great way for different groups to make money, that, they get to exposure to our races. I think it's good. I like it.
I mean, yeah, I think thing is, so we have with the community grants, we have people approaching us, for grant money, and something we've always say to them is, you can also, or instead of the grant, have your group volunteer. And I think if by doubling the amount, it makes it real money. I think for groups, community groups, if they don't get enough grant money or aren't approved for a grant from us, that it becomes a more legitimate way of them raising money by volunteering.
I like that too. I mean, and it's, they're working hard, they're earning it. I mean, I think it's a great way for the club to give back. I really like it.
All right. So all in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, Debbie, I will go ahead and adjust the budget accordingly for the different races that listed.
Okay.
Well,
And
okay.
just one thing on that, Shampoo, for next year.
Mhm.
This year we had one volunteer group. They were a no-show.
Oh,
right.
So I'm reaching out and to a couple of schools for track, and I said, if we get 2 schools or 3 schools, well, after the race, we could do like a dual meet or triple meet out there. So they'll have to stay to the end. So they'll be working their full shift, but they'll get a free, training lot.
There you go.
Have them do the kids run.
Yeah. Too bad it,
Kids run route. Woo!
wasn't good enough for autumn leaves, because they had the cross country invitational out there.
Okay.
So
Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. That was great discussion, and I really like that one. All right, Adnan and Mark Takazar, we're going to talk about the member challenges, just an update on how that's going and how many people have already accomplished it and how things are looking.
Yeah, so I can maybe try to speak a bit to this. I had some questions on how to exactly determine this, because I started looking at our run signup results, but I think I probably should be looking at the Huber timing website. I just don't know how to export that one, as well as I'm not sure how to I suppose just simply use the sheet that's on our website for the member tracking. And I guess maybe we can just sort of reiterate what the ask is here. Are we just trying to update that sheet there or validate against what's there by using like our participant lists and our volunteer lists?
I think what all we're trying to do is get an idea for how many people have actually completed the challenges. I think for the participant challenge, you would want to use Jeff Huber's website. And I think, I don't know how many,
The chart.
that his chart that he has on the website. I don't know if you can contact Jeff and ask if he can send you a download so that maybe you could do that after all of the events are entered. Autumn Leaves would be the last event for participants because we don't have results for Turkey Trot.
Okay, so is the chart that you guys mean the one that's with the is linked on our member challenges page?
Yes.
Okay, that one.
That's
Okay, so is that one put together by Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, if I can
Yeah.
just use that one, that should be pretty simple, and I can then just look at potentially volunteers through run sign up.
Nope,
The
the volunteers.
The volunteers you'd actually use, I shared you the Google.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry. Yes.
That's the one that Carrie maintains because there's quite a few people who maybe sign up in run sign up, but then don't show.
Right.
Or there's all the people who show up and volunteer who don't sign up and run sign up. And so like Hal Brockman does it all the time. He never signs up, but he's always there. So what you want to do is be monitoring the spreadsheet that Carrie keeps updated because the race directors send her their approved list of volunteers after each event.
Okay, gotcha. I think then this makes it quite a bit simpler than being able to just use this piece, and I can try to get an idea for maybe just anyone who has potential to still meet the challenge with the remaining event left over. But okay, yeah.
Do you have a good database right now? Because the two pieces were missing. I could get that. So right after autumn leaves, we could probably compile and finalize the numbers. Get it out there. So.
For the participation one, you could finalize the numbers after autumn leaves. That would tell you how many cups you need to order for the recipients. Volunteer, you have to wait until after Turkey Trot.
Yeah.
Okay. Joel?
Oh, I just had my hand up because, I mean, since we're using a little bit of a different platform with Ultra Sign Up, like Adam, could you just like email me what you need and I can give you like the volunteers and the participants that are still eligible for that challenge.
Okay, so would they not be in the sheet that Tracy, you had shared with me?
The autumn leaves volunteers would not be on the sheet yet because they haven't shown up yet.
I'm sorry.
Joel and Deb will get their list of final volunteers after the event to carry, and that's when you would find the final list of volunteers.
Yeah,
gotcha. But the ones for Hag Mud would be in there though.
Yes, they're in there already.
Hag Mud is already in there.
Okay, I think I should have everything I need then. Let me just do a super quick double check on this. Okay, so I think I actually do need the Hag Mud participants.
Okay.
The participants are on the Jeff Huber chart.
I don't see them for Hag. Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're right. I was looking at Hag Lake, same thing as before. I just didn't scroll.
Gotta scroll.
Exact same thing. I was looking at Hag Lake. Okay, I apologize. I didn't realize they'd be on there. Okay, no, but this is again easier than I expected it to be.
Basically, you're just going to use these lists to determine how many mugs and how many coasters we need to order.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Then yeah, Joel, if you could just get me the volunteers, then I think that should be it.
Yeah.
Okay, just volunteers, not participants.
Yeah, I think should be.
Jeff Huber will.
Jeff Huber will.
Yeah, Jeff Huber should have the participants, I think.
And the
volunteers. So for just for full transparency, for autumn leaves, we're doing our own timing, so I can get you participants as well.
Oh.
Right. So what you want to do is then you would need to get the participants to Jeff Huber as well, so he can track them on there.
I can do that, no problem.
So just send them to both.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, as long as it sounds like we're keeping the sheet that's linked on our member challenges page as the like sheet of record, and so as long as we keep going back to that, we should be good.
Yes.
Awesome.
We'll make sure they show up there.
Fabulous.
And we'd like to have them to hand out at the banquet if possible,
At the end of January.
at the end of
So
January. So
basically, after Turkey Trot, that's when you have the numbers and we know what to order. So. Okay. That's it for the discussion topics. For recent events, I'll just say Portland Expo went really well. We gave away a whole bunch of stuff. All of the swag and good pictures of the turkey. Joel, was that you in the turkey outfit?
It may have been.
And Mark, we did find the feet in the storage unit. We just didn't catch it with the rest of the outfit. So
Okay, good.
and we've already talked about Best Damn Run a little bit. Some of you weren't there at the beginning of the meeting before the meeting started, but I think it went really well. You guys didn't get rained on, did you, Susan? You were protected.
I'll give a report on that. Hal and I were the guys setting up and taking down. Weather was perfect. Did not rain on us at all. Cool and overcast. Logistically, everything worked. No major injuries or events like that. Like anything, it was first time race directors. Some little things that didn't quite go their way or things that I would have done differently, but that's the way it is with each race director does things a little bit differently, and first timers are gonna make rookie mistakes. But overall, it was work. Lots of happy people, and we continue with the tradition of the bar next door giving out drinks to people, and I sat in there a while and talked to people, and they were just happy. It was so we did well with all that, and so it worked. It was just one of the great things that make ORRC what it is. Low key, fun events, that sense of community and all of that. It worked.
Cool. And Susan, you were there and it went well too? You thought it was fun?
Yeah, it went well. It was exactly as Mark described it. It was low key and it worked and people were very happy. It did seem like for some reason, right? They said that we should be all on the buses by 8:30 and I was in line at like 8:20 and at 8:30 the bus came and then it filled up and I didn't get to get on it because there were too many people in line ahead of me. And then they said, oh, it won't be very long. And then another bus will come. And then another bus came. And then there was even one more after that. But those buses got to the start line really close to the start time. And that seemed a little bit not great to me. I mean, there were people sprinting down to the bathrooms and it was like 3 minutes to 9 and whatever. But I think that was the choice people made to not get there earlier and catch an early bus. So that's the way it
I
goes.
think so. That's something that if you've not done it before, you don't get. Because actually, what happened this year, we had a woman show up at 8:59, going, "I'm ready to run," and they go, "Well, good luck." So it worked out. I mean, somebody dropped off at the start, and the timer was still there, and all of that. But
Yep.
it's one of the logistical things about that particular race.
Yep.
You got to get on the bus well in advance. And it just maybe push that
Right.
what pre-race instructions, put that out there so people understand that. Yeah, go ahead.
And I didn't push it. Gwen and I arrived at like 7:59 to the town of Estacada, got out of the car, walked over, got our numbers. They gave us a swag bag. We decided we didn't want to deal with that. We walked back to the car, put it in the car, stood in line for the bathroom, stood in line for the bus, finally got on a bus, got out there, sprinted down to the bathroom and back, and it was like race time. And so that was within an hour before race time, we arrived in Estacada. So it's just one of those races that you got to get there early.
Yeah. And emphasize that. And we also, for those of you who weren't here, we talked a little bit about drop bags, and that was it will get better next year because you definitely need to do drop bags, particularly for the race later in the year, September. When it was in September, you really don't need that extra layer. October you do, and therefore you need drop bags and a way to handle them efficiently.
Upcoming events, we've talked a little bit about autumn leaves. Joel, is there anything else you want us to know about what's going on there?
Oh, yes. I think we're on track to have a nice small key kind of race. We got 50 people signed up.
Cool.
We have, are you ready for one of the pieces of swag?
Cool. Oh, that's awesome.
That's cool.
Is that a tin camping cup?
It's ceramic.
Ceramic, okay. Cool.
And then there's going to be some homemade items, as Deb mentioned.
Yep.
I think we're pretty good on volunteers. We might need a few more at a few kind of key spots, and we're looking to fill those. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be, I mean, like I look back historically, have you guys seen numbers around like 75 generally for that race?
You know, we haven't had it in so long. I don't remember what the numbers were prior, because
Okay.
last time we had it was 2019, I think.
20, yeah, or yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I think we'll probably finish in, I mean, who knows, in the mid 60s, and some things that we've done to keep expenses low. I mean, the mugs were pretty well priced, and there's going to be some maybe, I don't want to give out too much away, but some vintage swag, we'll say, that people might like or hate.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to doing our aid station.
Oh yeah, there's going to be some decorations. There's the characters. You're going to love it.
Cool. Okay, turkey trot. Anything that we need to know, Mark?
Things are on track. Beanies are ordered. Chocolate turkeys are on order. I'm recruiting volunteer groups and individuals are signing up. The only other, I'm gonna in the next day or two send out email. Like I say, the key volunteers, like the leaders at different positions. I know for sure, like already that Margie is not available to take her job again this year, but just to confirm, excuse me, those people that had a key lead position last year, if you're willing to do the same this year, and if not, then then I'll need to recruit those. But that's things are on schedule. I got the permit from the contract with the zoo been signed, and I got the permit from City of Portland. That's all set up, and so it's just registration is just shy of 900 this morning, so we're on track to fill it up.
The registration is lower than last year at this time, but the monetary income is same or higher. So
Okay.
yeah. Cool. All right. So basically, we've already approved the budget, so we don't need to do that in November. Finalize the election ballot. The next meeting is going to be November 11th. That's Veterans Day at 7 o'clock. We're going to skip the December meeting. And then just remember the January meeting is the annual membership meeting. And if there's any other topics or items you want, if one of you wants to be secretary in 2006, please let me know. Since Deb doesn't want to do it anymore, we need to find a secretary. Otherwise, is there anything else? Had some great discussions tonight. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate all.
I just want to think about us well in advance, but of course the turkey stuffing. But all we'll have to find a new place to host it. Bonnie is
Oh yeah.
Can't use Bonnie's house, but we'll figure it out. The place to meet. So stuffing the turkeys. So it's a holiday tradition.
Right.
I think the Pilgrims did that way back when. I could be wrong, but.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for a good meeting, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of you at Autumn Leaves on the 25th. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.